Okay, so I've just come off a forum, and actually it was quoting the Prime Minister or the President of the Czech Republic, can't remember which, but he was pondering the question which a lot of people have been asking: why is it that seemingly young, strong, healthy Syrian men are not at home fighting? Now, this is something that's been brought up quite a lot in coverage of the migrant debate, and it's something I'd like to address because it's something that I've given some thought to. I don't claim to know everything, and I'm not saying that everything I'm saying represents the whole situation, but I do think it is worth contemplating. So, the implication of this question is that Syrian men lack honor. That's pretty much the implication, that they are cowards, that they lack honor. Why aren't they fighting for the homeland? And why is there so many men among the refugees as opposed to women and children? Um, Honestly speaking, it does seem that there is a disproportionate number of men among the refugees. That is true. But I think, as with so much of the Syrian civil war, people have a very short memory. They seem to think this thing began a year ago or something, and they're ignoring what has happened in the beginning. Now, I've been following this from the beginning, and it seems to me that the situation has gradually got worse, but it's partly got worse because the extreme elements have taken hold of the war. They've claimed the ground. So at the start of the war, it was the Assad regime versus groups like the Free Syrian Army, which were comparatively speaking moderate. Um, I think we'll have to be careful about comparing anything to the democratic groups, but comparatively speaking, they were moderate. They were trying to overthrow a brutal dictatorship, and let's never ever lose sight of the fact that this is a very brutal dictatorship with a track record of torture, of brutally silencing dissidents. This really does go on. Um, at the start of the war, there was countless reports of the Shabiha, Assad secret police, rounding people up, torturing them. Truly heinous. I remember this well, the reports of it, and not just the reports. I know a Syrian who has personally testified to just how thuggish these people are. I have no doubt about that because I've seen it from numerous sources what they are capable of. And like every dictatorship, you basically need the muscle to keep yourself in power. Um, so at the start of the war, it was groups of people fighting against the Assad regime, and many of the men today who are refugees are former FSA fighters. That's a fact. Many of them are. But these were not men who chose to be professional soldiers. They realized when the Arab Spring came that it was their opportunity to rise up against their own dictatorship. And I think just dismissing all Middle Eastern countries as crazy and full of Islamists is very misleading. Syria was a sophisticated society. Many of these men are professionals, teachers, doctors, lawyers, and so on. These guys aren't crazy Islamists, certainly not most of them. Um, I'll come to the point about infiltration and so on in a bit, but to me, this notion that they should be staying at home and fighting is very ignorant, and it is based on a very Edwardian mentality that we had in Europe at the time of the First World War. But what is fundamentally different is that the Western Front of World War One, not talking about the Eastern Front because that's different, but the Western Front of World War One was predominantly pitched armies versus pitched armies. Now it was still a horrible war, no question about that, and it was a major war, but it was predominantly armies versus armies, with the exception of the events in Belgium and aerial bombardments, which were lower in skill in World War Two. But the point is, it was predominantly armies versus armies. It was very little urban fighting in the Western Front of World War One. Now, contrast it with Syria, where it's overwhelmingly a guerrilla war. Yes, there's battles, but it's battles that very much involve the civilian population, like Kobani, Damascus, Aleppo, and so on. My point is, It's a fundamentally different type of war, and you have to look at that nature of civil wars. Now, the choice for Syrian men right now, it seems to me, is fight for the Assad regime, backed by Russia, or fight for ISIS. Or another Islamist group like the Al Nusra Front. Now, what sort of choice is that? So the implication that these men are cards, people are not looking at the choice that they actually have. And the fact is, if they fight for Assad, they'll have civilian blood on their hand. If they fight for one of those Islamist groups, they'll have civilian blood on their hand. So they can't win. Now, if you were a Syrian man in that position, what choices would you have? Also, in some cases, I know that their wives and family have already left to Turkey. So I think there's a lot of misleading information going on here. Now, it's very easy for guys in the West and women for that matter to pontificate and say, oh, where's the honour of these men? But, we can sleep comfortably in our beds at night, most of us. So I think it's very um, crass to kind of judge these people in a desperate situation. We're not in their shoes. We don't know what sort of choices we would make. And that may be the only choice there is. The Free Syrian Army is fragmented. So I really wish people would just contemplate a little bit more without just dismissing all Syrian men as being cards. It's a choice of fight for the brutal Assad regime or fight for a brutal Islamist group. Russia, incidentally, as far as I'm concerned, has a lot to answer for with its unwavering support of this vicious regime, which, by the way, has killed a lot more people in Syria than ISIS has. Um, so just leave it there. It's something to think about when we talk about gender and war. Another point: while we're on it, why is male lives considered expendable? Of course, it's awful when women and children die, but why is a male life expendable? This is a war that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives, and the majority are probably male. I mean, of course, it gets attention when women and children are killed, and it should do because they're vulnerable people. But not all men are professional soldiers or are hardened militants. It's just I mean, it's easy to pontificate. Look, if say let's say for the sake of argument, Britain was suddenly a state of civil war, would I be fighting? Of course I would. Let's just get far out here and say, let's say the Scottish nationals break away and it turns into an armed conflict. Would I fight for my country? Absolutely, I would. But then, if the war took a turn and started getting very ugly and both sides started committing civilian massacres, I'd seriously wonder what my options were. That's the truth. And I think we really, really have to look at the situation these men are facing. Plus, a lot of women and children are actually in Turkey. That's another point that a lot of Europeans talking about this are overlooking. Now, I'm not saying that all of these men are innocent, and I did mention that there may be Islamists infiltrating among them, but I still don't think that's a reason to collectively punish. I think they should be vetted as they come in, absolutely, but we should treat these men with just as much empathy as if we were in their shoes. Um, so there's a few things to think about. People need to stop treating this like a conventional European style war because it's not. It's a civil war. And the fact is, these men may have no other choice. If they stay in Syria, they will be forced to fight for Assad or forced to fight for ISIS. I don't see much other than that. Either way, they're going to be asked to kill civilians. So where's the honour in that? The implication is the cards or they're dishonourable for leaving women and children behind, which isn't entirely accurate because women and children are also fleeing to Turkey. But the implication is misleading. I just think we have no right to judge when we're not in their shoes. Certainly, if it's reported that they've committed a certain action, that's different. But individually, I don't think we've any right to judge. And I think, frankly, we'd be doing exactly the same thing if that was our choice.